So as Eric starts reading off the special recognition notes, I'll work my way to the podium.
Are we ready?
Oh, did he say?
I think so. If you would all please take your seats. Let me welcome you to this meeting of the Prince William County Electoral Board. Actually, I spoke too early. Would you actually please rise for a moment of silence? And then the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. And now the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. So the first order of business is approval of minutes. And do we have a copy of the?
It's right there.
Here?
Yeah, your hand, right underneath that one. Yep.
So you want to move for the minutes?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, I move we approve the minutes for the April 2nd meeting.
Second.
Okay, the meeting, or the minutes have been circulated, approved by all the board members, but all in favor say aye. Aye. Pass. So next is a report from the electoral board members. Mr. Secretary?
Thank you, sir. Good morning and welcome. Thank you for being here. There's never a dull moment, it seems, in Prince William County. It seems that we're always either in the middle of an election, recovering from one, or getting ready to go into the next one. And regardless of which phase we find ourselves in, one immutable truth seems to be consistent, and that's to always expect the unexpected. And that certainly held true recently in the 11th hour of preparation for this dual primary. After the ballot layout had already been approved and was moving to the printer, one of our candidates had to withdraw for health reasons, and immediately prompted a flurry of activity. And the general registrar and his staff acted splendidly and promptly, retooling the ballot, getting everything set for the logic and accuracy testing in order to be ready to open the polls on time for the early voting. And of course, that started May 2nd. It's underway. And I believe by the last report, I think 70 voters have taken advantage so far, just under 70 voters of the early voting. And as always, for the remainder of this election, as well as the general election to follow in November, it is our goal to make sure that we do everything that we can to see that it is smooth, fair, secure, accurate, and transparent. That's our goal. And thank you, election officers, for being with us today. That is not possible without your help. And you guys have been amazing in the past, and I know we can look forward to the same kind of performance from you in the future. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Madam Vice Chair?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. Just a quick note about logic and accuracy testing, which I attended last week, and Carol is here, and Sean, and of course John, Eric. It was my first time, so it was very interesting to see the procedure. And again, I want to commend the professionalism and the excellence with which our team, our staff, take care of the machines and the logic and accuracy testing, which of course is required by law. So thank you all for doing that, and thank you for letting me participate and observe. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All right. Just one thing. If you want to sign those. I wanted to acknowledge the years of public service of Congressman Jerry Conley. He was first elected to Congress in 2008, and at that time, much of Prince William County was part of the 11th Congressional District. And so he represented much of Prince William County from 2008 up until 2022, when the new districts were drawn. He had a field office in Woodbridge during that entire time, very active, spent a lot of time in Prince William County. You know, some of you probably have heard he has announced that he's not going to be running for another term in Congress. And in fact, his cancer is serious enough that he's also stepping back from his role as a ranking member on the House Oversight Committee. And so he has you know, spent decades in public service to Prince William and Fairfax. Before he was elected to Congress, he was on the Board of Supervisors in Fairfax County, and he was chair for 5 years. And he liked to brag about his experience in local government, and that local government being the closest to the voters and to the citizens. And he often told a story about how one Sunday morning when he was chairman of the Board of Supervisors in Fairfax, he got a phone call on Sunday morning. A constituent called and said, "Well, Jerry, there was a deer that was hit in our neighborhood over the weekend, and the dead deer is now in my front yard. You need to get somebody out here to take care of that." And Jerry said, "Well, I'm happy to make some calls, but you know that the police department has an entire division, animal control, that's responsible for this kind of stuff." And this citizen said, "Oh yeah, I know all about animal control, but I didn't want to bother them on a Sunday morning." So that's sort of the you know, the experience, and I just wanted you know, to take a moment to recognize his service both to Prince William and Fairfax County and in Congress. So thank you for that. So next is our special recognition of early voting officer leaders.
Okay, so we, during the November election, we had a lot of challenges that we had to think about and face when we were going into early voting. We knew we were going to have a high volume of voters. We knew that we were going to have an expanded number of check-in stations and be able to push through a lot of voters in a short span of time. We knew there's going to be more media members and observers than usual. I say that right as the camera moves in there. We knew we were going to have added public safety concerns. This was our first presidential election in Virginia where we had same-day registration available during early voting, and we provided real-time line data for the public, so letting people know how long the lines were. We met those challenges really well, and we you know, want to recognize our officers today because we served 97,000 total voters. On the final day of voting, we had a single-day record for Prince William County with more than 8,000 voters going out and voting at early voting sites. We had a previous record of a single site for a single day, standing at 1,532 voters back in 2020. Well, DMV and Haymarket had 10 days total that exceeded that number, and the high ended up at almost 2,100 now at the DMV for the busiest day. So those two sites in particular processed and assisted a lot of voters. The main office in Courthouse set new voter ties, and I think, you know, one of the key things overall to all this with the volume was there weren't a lot of wait times. Maybe the first day and the last couple days, the Saturdays. Other than that, voters were in and out or waited a few minutes. So that was great. We got reports of high levels of voter satisfaction. I know that most of the voters were very gracious and thankful towards the officers in person, and we didn't have any safety issues or accidents or significant incidents, and thanks to our police and public safety officers for providing some extra support on that to make sure that our officers felt secure. Not a lot of campaign conflicts, a lot of compliments from our observers, and everything came out accurately. So we wanted to thank you all today, and we wanted to recognize you for the early voting leaders that were our chiefs and assistant chiefs at our sites for the great work you did, because you guys made that possible. We work as a board and as the office to set the policies and provide the structure, but you guys are the ones that actually go out there and make it happen and have to deal with the difficult situations and have to smooth over things and assist people and give them direction, and we really appreciate that. It is such a public service that you all provide year in and year out, and I know that because I see your faces over there, and I know I've been seeing your faces
since the day I started here, so I really appreciate everything you do. So I will hand it over to John and the board to recognize you individually for your achievements and show our appreciation.
Thank you, Eric. Good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to take a moment to recognize this outstanding group of election officers that are here with us today. During the 2024 general election, these individuals worked long hours, oversaw operations, and guided their team to ensure a smooth, secure, and welcoming voting process. Their professionalism and resilience supported thousands of voters throughout early voting. Their positive attitudes and steady leadership set the tone for their precincts. No matter how busy the day or how long the line, their calm presence ensured voters received excellent service. This recognition also honors the dedicated teams they led with care and patience. Their efforts upheld the integrity of our democracy and left a lasting positive impression on our community. Please join me in thanking our early voting leadership teams. Your hard work and leadership made all the difference, and we are truly grateful to you all. All right, so I will call you all one at a time. Once I call your name, feel free, you'll get your nice gift from us and a handshake from our electoral board. All right, first up from the main office, Virginia Cantu. All right, Virginia, we'll get a photo. All right, thank you, Virginia. All right, next one is Donna Quick. Unfortunately, she was unable to join us, but she was also part of the main office team. All right, next up is from the DMB over at Woodbridge, Suzanne Knight.
So the DMV rules.
All right, next up, also from the DMV, Mylene Kent. All right, next up from the Haymarket Gainesville Library, John Tyson.
John has worked at the library so long, they made him an honorary library boy.
Next person, also from the library, but unfortunately she was unable to join us. She was very bummed out, but Karen Hannon. All right, next we move to the Brentsville Courthouse Historic Center, William Sullivan.
Never been to the Brentsville Historic Courthouse Early Vote Center? I urge you to go there. It's one of the coolest offices, one of the neatest places for voting, and they don't have any overhead lighting, so they look like candle lighting.
And they don't have a line either, so. But they were very busy this last go around. Okay. All right, next up is also from the Brentsville Courthouse, Tom Mazurek.
Oh, okay.
All right, now we're going to move over to the Dumfries Community Center. First up, Mrs. Tessie Collins. Tessie had to deal with a lot over there, especially plumbing issues. But they got the job done. All right, next up, also from the Dumfries Community Center, Michael Molnar. And also from the Dumfries Community Center, Richard Hanscom. All right, so that was our last one that was able to make it out today. We weren't able to, or the chief and assistant chief from the Ferlazzo building weren't able to join us today, Ralph Newell and Jamie Jeffers, but we will make sure that they get these placards as soon as possible, as soon as they start working this early voting process. All right, that's it. Thank you all for coming out here. All right, that was all. Yeah, you can go back to work.
Thank you all very much.
All right, thank you for coming out. Good seeing you. I'll see you next time.
Big surprise.
Yeah, thank you.
There. Haven't been the last couple of days, but
Okay, well, it's gone. Good.
got it. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. Well, thank you, and yeah, again, let me echo how important all of the chiefs, election day, early voting, especially last year, we put everybody through the ringer with three separate elections. So it seemed like almost every week there was voting going on for some primary somewhere, some election. So thanks to all the people that work at early voting, as well as the people in the precincts on election day. So the next item is the general registrar's report.
Okay, before I started my report, I also just want to recognize the members of our operations team that really make early voting go, from John's oversight to that process, Carol, who coordinates all the early voting staffers, and a huge schedule of individuals and logistics around that. She has more responsibilities on early voting than anybody else on staff, and it has always gone really smoothly. So a round of applause for Carol in particular. And then also to Sean and Brian and Ben and Nick and the staff on our operations team that are supporting the equipment and everything that's happening during that process as well. So I just wanted to make sure to mention all of them as well. Okay, so moving on to my report, I'm going to talk about our election prep for this upcoming election, which is, I guess, technically underway now. We have early voting started on Friday. Mail ballots have been sent out. I know that some of them have been confirmed to have arrived, so we are going to see, an uptick here. So I wanted to note at the start that all the information for early voting, the dates, the locations, mail voting, how to find your precinct for election day, sample ballots, that's all up to date on the website, so the public can go find any information and important dates they need on the website. In terms of our task preparation, one of the things I do each election is provide reports at any of the board meetings leading up to the election about where we are for task progress. So we have mailed out almost 17,000 ballots, and we only had about 50 voters in the first 2 days, but primaries are usually our, obviously our lightest election that we have, so we know that we won't have a huge turnout. But we always encourage voters to participate in them because these are the candidates that are going to appear on the ballot in the general election. So this is an opportunity to make your voice heard for whatever party you choose. Our preparations are staying on track for this election. We have 145 tasks that we're supposed to have completed to this point. Board members, you have I've provided a copy of this to you by email, and this is a physical copy. We have only 2 tasks that are not complete to the date. Finalizing any purchases needed for the election. We are pretty close to completing that. There's just a few small things, but all of our major contracts and vendors are in place and ready to go. And then outlining the needs for chief headquarters, which probably we just need to move the date for that back some because it usually takes a back seat to getting early voting started. So we might just need to move that a couple weeks further down the road, closer to the election. I think we already have all of our infrastructure for that in place. Usually that's more of a concern for a general election because we have to examine whether we need to ramp up, the number of phone lines and that kind of thing. But we don't get nearly as many voter calls during a primary as we do just handling, issues at the precinct and equipment problems or a facility issue or staffing, whatever it might be that kind of arises on election day. So we'll catch up on those in short order, and we are already ahead on about 15 tasks that are already completed ahead of schedule. So it's really good news. I think this is one of the best, ratios of tasks behind to tasks that are ahead that I've seen since we started doing this. So I'm feeling very good about where we are this election, and it's especially good considering we had to, a number of these tasks had to be done twice because of the candidate withdrawal, which is the next item on here. So Pat Harity, who was a Republican for lieutenant governor, had to withdraw for health reasons, and the state has some options in that instance. They can either, if ballots have been printed, they can go forward and just post a notice to voters stating that the individual is not going to be on the ballot anymore, or they can actually withdraw him from the ballot. They opted to do that in this instance. So there's no statewide primary for this particular contest. And given that it was the only statewide primary for the Republican Party, that means there are a number of counties that don't have a primary at all now. And in Prince William, I'll get to it in just a second, we have a limited Republican primary. So this is what that looks like then. We posted this on Twitter. We have it on our website to help voters with a pretty simple graphic. We've also got it at our early voting sites. Right when voters check in, the officers will direct voters to this image, which should help them with making a decision about what primary they want to vote in, or lets them know why a primary is not available. So the Democratic ballot has lieutenant governor and attorney general on all the ballots. There's the only 2 contests. So every Democratic ballot across the county is the same this election for this primary. The Republican ballot is not available in most of the counties. So in the Gainesville district and a little area just south of that, in the 21st House of Delegates district, we do have a primary with 3 candidates. The rest of the county does not have a Republican primary. Now voters, Virginia is an open primary state, so voters can opt to vote for either primary that they would choose, but we are providing the maps of the precincts so that the voters know that it's because a primary is not available. Sometimes they get mad at us because there's not a primary, and we don't have any control over that. The candidates file with the parties, the party files with the state, and we host the election and do the logistics of it for the parties, but we don't have any control over what primaries are available or what primaries are happening. So we hope that visual will provide a little more information for people. And we'll kind of see how that goes during early voting as well. A number of changes because of this. We had to delay our logic and accuracy testing, but we did complete that on time. We had to change a few procedures for the officers and instructions for the voters. That was the elements that I was just talking about. It does change our ballot mailing. Our initial mail out was 4,000 less ballots because all of those voters that have requested a permanent absentee for the Republican primary. There are 4,000 of those roughly in those districts outside of the 21st district. I think we still sent out over 1,000 to the 21st district for the Republican primary. It does change our officer parity requirements outside of the 21st. So the 21st, we have both primaries. We would still need to have equal parity, but we do, the code does allow in, and I've posted up here, for a primary election involving only one political party, persons representing the political party holding the primary shall serve as officers of elections if possible. So we are still sticking with our original plan because we already sent out our assignments to officers, and it's good to have all the officers that we'd like to participate in the general election to continue to get that experience and be involved. But it does mean that if we have substitutions and changes as this primary goes along, that those precincts that are outside the 21st district are not held to that same standard of 1-to-1. So it does give the staff a little bit more flexibility, since a lot of the precincts will only have a Democratic primary. But as I said, the original plan is meeting the requirements of 24-115, so are our early voting sites, so are our CAP sites, our CAP team, so, and then we have modified the ballot order slightly. We do have one facility change, precinct 703. There's construction at Fredlin Middle School. So we are moving, it's kind of down the street to Elizabeth Vaughn Elementary. That is an administrative process that we have to submit to the state. So we have submitted the form to them. We are awaiting approval. We have till election day for that. So we do have some time still, and we're anticipating we will get that back shortly. Once we do have that approval from the state, we will mail notice to, there's a little over 2,800 voters in that precinct. We'll mail them all a notice that says, for this election only, Fred Lynn is not available, and your voting location for this election is at Vaughn Elementary School. Those voters can still go and vote early. They can still vote by mail, just like any other voter. So they still have all those options available to them. But
Can you put signs at the middle school directing people, so if they don't pay attention to the mail, they show up on election day, there'll be a sign telling them where they should be going to
yeah,
vote?
John was already working on that, so we're just finalizing to get that printed. Because a lot of people will miss the mailing and then they'll show up and wonder what's going on. So we'll have a couple signs there to direct people to the correct location in case they show up there. Okay, so a couple items for board input. Our ballot order changed. We did not decrease any ballots from our original totals that you all approved. So I can tell you what we did do. We added, because we have a very limited Republican primary, we went ahead and added some additional ballots. I think it was 100 more per precinct for election day for the Republican primary, just in case that's a little more focused, since that's the only primary that's going on. It still doesn't change the voters that are eligible to vote in that primary, so it shouldn't change that much. On the other side, we added at least 100 and sometimes 200 ballots to each of the Democratic primaries at all of the precincts across the county. And that's because we figured without a Republican primary, some voters might go in, find out there's not a Republican primary, decide they would like to vote in the Democratic primary, and then go ahead and vote. So we thought that could increase slightly. When we looked at those totals, and this is in the chart that I emailed to you all, compared to 4 years ago in 2021, which was a Democratic-only primary across the county, we have 2 to 4 times the number of ballots in each precinct that were requested at those precincts back in 2021. The only one that was not was one in, I believe it was either the Potomac District or the Woodbridge District, and I believe it was because one of the candidates was on the ballot, and that was their home precinct. So that's the only one that was not, and there were special circumstances that existed. So I just wanted to check, since the board had already approved that. We didn't decrease any totals on any precincts, but we did add some to each precinct to cover for those possibilities. It does mean, because there's less primaries with the Republican primary not being held in most of the county, our ballot order did decrease, which did reduce our costs a little bit. So, but we bit into that a little bit by just increasing it to cover ourselves in case there's a different eventualities. Any concerns about that, or?
And after all is said and done, we ended up saving 6,000 or 6,000.
I think it was probably like 15,000-ish, I think. I can't remember what the exact number was. I think we cut down about 30,000 ballots. So it's definitely more than $10,000. I don't have offhand what the printing cost per ballot is. I feel like it's 35 cents-ish per ballot. Okay, I'm getting nods that is approximately correct. So a little over $10,000 saved, I think, there. The officer change, I wanted to get any board input on. The election officer team is going to keep the roster as has been assigned and sent already, so we're not going to go back and modify places with a Dem-only primary to have only Dems there, but we will simply fill in from this point on in those precincts outside the 21st district with just the best officer available regardless of party, given that there's only one primary in those precincts. So I just wanted to check if that approach is acceptable to the board. Okay.
That makes sense.
Okay. And we will provide you all with a couple different updates, over the next 5 or 6 weeks leading up to Election Day, so you all can flag any concerns that you see. Okay, awards. I forgot to put this in the draft that I sent you guys, but we did win. We did win an award. So the Clearys the Clearinghouse Awards are run by the Election Assistance Commission. They are a national award that started in 2016 to recognize best practices in election administration across the country. So if you have a program that you think is a model program, either you're doing something that people have done, but you're doing it in a new or different way that was particularly well executed, or if you've come up with a novel idea that other places are not using yet or haven't implemented, you're a good nominee for this type of program. And we won an award for our work publishing results tapes online in the Innovations or New Practices in Election Administration category. And we also got an honorable mention for our sticker program, 4 years, 5 stickers. The ranked choice voting competition that we had, that our election officers selected 5 stickers, one being a future voter sticker, and the other being I voted stickers over the next 4 years here. So we got an honorable mention in that category as well. So some nice recognition from the EAC there. We do have we've added a new press page to our website. Something we've been talking about for a little while to put up. We didn't really have a home for some of our press statements by either the board or our office, articles that are written about us, awards, that kind of thing. So we added that area. I think it's really useful for media members that call us. It's a good way for us to direct them to resources and materials, and a good way for the public to see some of this information. So we do have all of those program outlines, and the submissions we sent in are posted on that page. There's a clearinghouse section that we added to that page, and it details each of those programs. So if the public would like to go see those, they are available on the website. Okay, budget updates. Our fiscal 26 budget was approved. We have a $3.95 million baseline budget for our office. That's just a slightly uptick from last year on the baseline. We did get approval for our $2.4 million for new equipment. So that's a one-time addition coming out of the capital improvement budget for the county. And the timeline to implement that would be estimated to be January 2026. So we will be using our current equipment for the rest of this year, and then the goal would be that next year we would use the remainder of calendar 25 to get in place a master plan and a contract with a vendor, and that we would receive these materials in January of next year so that we can implement that equipment. These are our ballot scanners and our ADA devices for individuals with disabilities. that we have in every polling place and at every early voting site. So we do want to review our plans for that equipment purchase, and that is one of the components for our closed session today. The budget update. So we've had a little bit of trouble this year with keeping within our budget. It's a presidential year as part of this fiscal year, so it's a little bit challenging. And one of the things I have to do, the Office of Management and Budget for the county publishes quarterly reports on their website. And if we are outside of, I think it's 3% of where we should be at each quarter, so at each quarter it should be 25, 50, 75, 100% of your budget. If we're outside of that by 3%, we have to send an explainer. I send an explainer basically every quarter, every year, because we're always low in the first quarter because we don't have an election then, and we're always high after the second quarter because we have our busiest election of the year then. We always still are a little high or right around on track by the third quarter, and then by the fourth quarter, we're usually where we land. So right now, we're a little over budget because you can see that second quarter was almost 50% of our budget for the year. We have been very careful this third quarter. We spent only 13% of our budget. So we've cut back on a few things. We've really restricted some things internally. Obviously, we're not doing anything like overtime. We don't have temps in-house during the third quarter, so that comes back. And I've been in communication with the Office of Management and Budget over the last several months, and I'm estimating that we're going to be about 104% for the year and about 22% in this last quarter. So that is, let me go to the next slide. I think we're about 190,000 over right now. Now I should note that that's mostly because of increased presidential election costs. The other element that's here is that a couple years ago, we got additional funding for a program to digitize all of our old registration records. That should have been done several years ago under the previous administration, but was not. And we got funds to hire a contractor to do that. And then at the 11th hour, the state said you can't hire a contractor. So we weren't able to use some of those funds we had in fiscal 23, and we were over in that year. We were a good amount to the good in that year. We were also 70,000 to the good in fiscal 24, last fiscal year. So we're a little bit over this year. So lesson learned, I think, for me on one part of that is that contract, but a lot of it is just the increased presidential election costs. In 2020, our office asked for $1 million for additional for the presidential election. I thought that was really high. I asked for about $390,000 for the presidential election, and I guess I should have asked for maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of 550. So we are working to get that number as close to what our budget is as possible, but I'll continue to work with Office of Management and Budget on that and communicate anything I need to, either to them or the supervisors if they have any questions about that. This slide provides a little bit of an update on what our baseline budget is and what some of the initiatives that we've run over the last 4 years. Something for the board to think about, maybe what our next, I know we're going to be looking at strategic planning here soon, and what could our potential initiatives be for fiscal 27 and fiscal 28 and going forward. Our baseline budget was about 3.4 million and has gone up to about 3.9 million. Some of that is just administrative changes and inflationary adjustments over the last 3 or 4 years. Some of that is a little additional funding for certain programs. We are mailing out more ballots. We have a lot of early voting sites that we support. So I think that some of that is catching up with changes that were made to how Virginia elections worked 4 or 5 years ago by adding more early and mail voting. And inevitably, the funding for those types of things and what they require lags behind the legislation that implements them. So I think that we're in a pretty good place now. I feel like our budget is pretty stable and we're pretty supported for what we need to accomplish. Looking back on our initiatives in fiscal 23, we got money for redistricting, which is basically what the additional equipment we needed for new precincts. And we got money for a high-speed scanner, which has been really great for both mail and early voting reporting. That used to be our last item of reporting. Now it's the first thing that we report on election night, and the high-speed scanner really helps with that and makes that process go much smoother. We got, in fiscal '24, facility security upgrades. We have actually just recently completed those. We had to carry some of that over into fiscal '25, but a number of improvements to our ballot security, to the security of our staff, and some functional improvements to the space that we have here in our kind of older building that we use. In fiscal '25, we added the new IT position, and we got additional funding for the presidential election. And that year, we always have a special additional allocation in presidential years, just because the scope and scale of a presidential election requires additional temps, more ballots to be sent out, more ballots to be printed, all of those kind of things that increase costs. And then for fiscal '26 now, we have our new equipment that's been approved. So that is kind of a look at our budget over the last few years and the initiatives that we have participated in. In terms of purchase planning, our plan is to purchase a VVSG 2.0 compliant system. Per our recently resolved EB and GR duties, the GR and EB must routinely review agency needs for the planning and purchase of new replacement electronic voting equipment. And the GR will facilitate and work with the board to plan agency needs on that. So when we're talking about this, we're talking about with the equipment, what are the overall costs and the annual costs associated with that? What are the technical needs and requirements and certifications that equipment is required to have? What qualities, features, and adaptability does that equipment have, and how does that assist our voters? And are there any special needs that our voters have that they might not have in other locations? Are there logistical considerations to this? The size of the equipment, the weight of the equipment, how we transport it, the facilities that we put it in. What is the technical support that's provided by the vendor? How good is it? How robust is it? How many staff members do they have assisting us? And then what's the ease of use for voters and election officers? Can the voters, use it easily and it doesn't cause too much confusion? Are the election officers able to open the equipment, close the equipment, and troubleshoot the equipment without too much of a burden on them each election? So we want to review today the final decision in a closed session because there are competing bids in this situation. I think the closed session is the appropriate place to do that. And there is an exemption, A6, in the code for this. So I wanted to kind of outline the broader goal and the fact that we have received funding for that equipment in our general session, and then we can talk more specifics of the quotes that we've received and the systems that we've looked at in our closed session today. So that is all for my report this week, or this month.
So 2026 is the midterm, so unless we have a special for some reason, the earliest election would be the congressional primaries in June.
Yeah.
So the goal, that would be the first election we roll out the new equipment.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's best to do it when you have new equipment. There can always be things that you don't anticipate that can go wrong. I think it's best to do that in a primary if possible, when it's not as busy, when you can react to those sorts of things. I wouldn't anticipate those things, but I've been part of a few different agencies implementing new equipment, and I know that things can arise, whether that is needing to improve your instructions for how your officers use it, or whether it's just some flaw that the equipment might have, just like when you buy a truck and sometimes you find out there's a recall on the emergency brake or whatever it might be. It can be the same thing for new equipment when you get it from a vendor. So next year in the primary, so about a year from now, hopefully we'll be talking about the we finished the first few days of early voting, the equipment's working fine, the new equipment's working fine.
So are you going to be doing any kind of public, training or outreach, or, I remember the last time when we moved from DREs, the very first time to HART equipment, we had a couple of different things around the county where people could come in and just, here's the equipment, here's how you vote, and I remember there were there were some people that loved the idea of the scanners and the paper ballot, and then there were some people that thought, you're crazy, you're going back to paper ballots, you know, what, that's not good. So I hope that you'll think about some kind of public events or, you know, something to help roll out the new equipment that people can come and see before they actually use it in June.
I think that we definitely want to do a number of outreach events. We definitely want to do a lot of social media and notices to voters about that kind of stuff. We've talked about the fact that this equipment would be capable of allowing voters to review their ballot before they scan it. So right now, if you go to scan your ballot, unless there's a problem found by the scanner on your ballot, you know, you didn't fill anything in or you overvoted a contest, and it spits it back. Otherwise, if you put it in and your ballot's good, it goes in and you're done. It tells you voted and you're good. We now have the option to set it up in a way that you as a voter can review it and confirm with a button on the screen that this were in fact your choices. So it's, you know, obviously a concern that we've heard from citizens is how do I know, you know, that it's counting my ballots right? And, you know, we've done recounts and audits and we know that our equipment is extremely accurate, but at an individual level, that person's just putting their faith that that machine's doing their job. Well, they'll not have a chance to confirm that. But what that's gonna take is some voter education. So we definitely are gonna have a strong voter education campaign around that. And I do want to send at some point, you know, I had written down a couple weeks ago to do some kind of survey of voters to find out what the appetite is for that option. In other words, you know, is that something that 30% of the voters want? Is that something that 80% of the voters want? I think that would inform, because obviously you can set up the machine in a number of ways for each election. These are all options we can program. So I think the board and our team having more information from voters to get a general sentiment would be, you know, really helpful. So I've been trying to think about what we might survey and what we might ask them. So if you all have questions that you would love to hear, we did that. We used that in DC. And it was really helpful because I know we were getting a lot of criticism from, at the time, we were reporting our results, you know, the results had to come back by car to the office before we could report them, the way the process worked there. And so if we didn't have our results ready for like the 10 o'clock newses that are going out, well, the media was bashing us and saying, well, so we surveyed the voters and we found the voters didn't care. I think, more than 50% of them said, we don't care if we find out on election night because they're not going to go into office for a couple months anyway. So it was interesting to hear that. You know, sometimes you have loud voices at the meeting and people that come and speak at meetings. Well, do they represent a overall tide from the public? Or are they representative of a vocal minority that is not representative of what most people want or are concerned about? So I always think that, you know, if you can survey and ask people some of those questions and get answers directly from them, then you get a more representative sample and you're able to make better decisions as leaders as to what the real needs of your voters are. So
well, that review function is actually when one of the biggest concerns we had at the time when we were shifting to HART for the very first time is, you know, whatever concerns people had about the DREs, you know, there was a visual, they were all on the screen, they could see which ones they'd selected, and they could see all that before they pushed the button, you know, count my vote, or this is my vote. And when we switched to the new equipment, we had voters saying, well, you know, I really like the old system where I could see what I did, and how do I know that what I'm putting in here is what so if that's a new feature, that will actually address some of the concerns that people have about paper ballots in any event.
Well, the DRE suffered from not having an audit trail.
Right.
So you didn't have any kind of document if a machine had a malfunction, there was no way to know that for sure. So the DREs had no audit trail. The paper ballots don't have that confirmation screen. So this new equipment would have both. You'd have an audit trail and you'd have a confirmation process. The downside now would be the voter education component, and does this slow up your lines at your polling place so much that it now creates some logistical problems or things like that at the polling place? Or do you have voters that were so used to the old machines, they keep coming in and scanning and just walking away, not realizing that they have to take an extra step? So it's going to take a public campaign to educate voters about that. And the good thing is we have a lot of time to work on that. And it's also going to take instructions and changes to how the election officers function at the polling place, so that that person that's over the scanner is saying to the voter, make sure you confirm your ballot by pressing the green button, or whatever that process is on the screen, so that the voters know what they can do. So that will be, anytime you solve a problem, there are, other, other things that pop up that you either anticipate or don't anticipate. So we'll be working to anticipate as much as we can.
Okay, new business, appointment of new election officers.
So you all have a list there. It's a pretty small list this week. It's 10 officers. And Keith, you have one. I just had one of that. That was a last second thing. The Republican Party did nominate one additional officer from the nonpartisan pool. Is that an existing officer already? Okay. So that's an officer that was already appointed, that is requested to become a Republican officer. And we could always use, more of those. So every little bit helps.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I move to approve the new election officer appointments as presented.
Second?
All right. Discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Election officer policy.
Okay, so you all have a sheet. You were emailed this last week that details some changes to the officer policy. Some of these are as simple as just grammatical updates, and then some of them were additions. And if Marcus, do you kind of want to take the lead on the new sections here?
Sure. So one of the things we've talked about several times in recent meetings is not only meeting the overall legal requirement for parity, having equal number of representatives from each party at each of the precincts in terms of the total election officers assigned. Also ensuring a balance of leadership between the parties across all precincts, meaning equal representation from both parties in the chief role across the 103 precincts. So the goal would be to have an equal number, plus or minus one, for each party, because we have an odd number of precincts. And so to that end, updating our election officer policy to that effect, also with a goal, understanding, and again, I have a hard time separating myself from my military service, things I learned when I was in the military. And of course, in the military, every 2 to 3 years, you get a new set of orders. You go somewhere new, you do something different. Leadership in a squadron changes every 18 months. A new squadron commander comes in, et cetera. And there's a reason that the military does that. It's good and it's healthy. One, it allows people to develop in their leadership roles, to get experience as leaders. So it's not the same person that's always the leader in every squadron all of the time. You build a depth in the bench, people who are qualified and capable and willing to serve in those leadership roles. It also keeps things fresh in a military unit, because if things are always the same, if it's always the same people doing the same things, it breeds familiarity. Familiarity often leads to complacency, and complacency leads to potential mistakes. And so it's our goal to keep circulation at our precincts, where qualified, ambitious, and capable election officers who want to serve in these leadership roles as an assistant chief or a chief know that there's a possibility that they could, and that those positions aren't locked down by the same people who always do that job. And that's not any type of casting any kind of an aspersion on the people who have served in those roles and done so admirably in the past. It's for the health of the system, it's for the health of the team, And what we want to foster is a culture of service over status. I know oftentimes, again, even in the military, we can start to tie our identity to a particular job that we do. And in some ways that's good, because that means you care about the job and you want to do a good job at it. But keeping that circulation going, there's benefit in that. And so that is what we've tried to accomplish through these updates to the election officer policy, codifying those, if you will, those goals, understanding too that there are limits. You have to have officers that are willing from both parties. They have to be experienced. They have to be capable. We don't want to sacrifice effectiveness and efficiency for the sake of appearance, so to speak. And so we've also implemented some minimum requirements in order to serve as a chief and as an assistant chief, meaning you have to have served in at least one election as an election officer before you're eligible to serve as an assistant chief or an equipment provisional specialist. And you have to serve at least one election as a provisional specialist or an assistant chief before you can be a chief. So that helps us avoid just putting a body with the right letter behind their name in a position of authority that maybe they're not ready to assume. So I don't know if I've covered it sufficiently there, but that's the goal of the additions to our election officer policy.
Yeah, I mean, I think they make sense overall. I would ask that if it would be okay with the board, if I could get input from, I haven't had time to get input from Dina and Rick and John on the changes, and I think the principles behind them look great. You know, Marcus and I had some discussions on this previously as well, and I totally understand his view of well, we used to call it, in DC, I had a number of election officers there who just wanted to wear the crown, is what I called it. Like they were the chief, but they weren't actually doing anything than sitting in the corner and telling people they were the chief. I haven't found that to be the case in Prince William County, but we want to prevent that type of thing from happening, and also make sure that we're meeting all the parity goals and all the other stuff that we've got. And I can't remember what it was, there was one little part of this that I thought, well, we might want to have like a caveat to that, to not lock our staff into some, sometimes, like, just as an example, I think that the sort of qualifications of you have to have a election before you can become, a chief or assistant chief, and then, a service and an assistant chief or EPS before you become a chief. I think those are really good, and we have had those internally, but I think the board codifying them for the office is a good way to go. But I would love an opportunity to get feedback from my team, just to make sure that the language isn't locking us into something that's going to create a problem. And I think I think we're in good stead for this election. And if we can get this, tweaked just a little bit by the next board meeting, then we'll be in good shape for November, if that would be okay with the board.
And I would add some context for those in the room who maybe weren't privy to previous conversations if you didn't attend previous board meetings. Kind of where this started was an analysis that we did on election officers over the last 5 elections, and we found that in those cases, roughly 65 or 66% of the chief roles were in one particular party. So there was a little bit of an imbalance between party representation in the chief role. There were about 17 precincts. We were about 17 precincts off from having totally balanced leadership at the chief in the chief positions. And so Dina McBride and Rick have worked very hard to try to shrink that disparity. I think we're now at 7. We're only 7 off. 8. Okay, we're 8 off now.
Oh,
so
no, we flipped 8.
Oh, we flipped 8. Okay.
So down to 9.
Great. So we're definitely trending, I think, in the right direction, with complete balance as the goal. We also found that in those last 5 elections, in roughly half of our precincts, it's been the same chief that was in charge all 5 times. And again, while I commend and admire their dedication for sure, and we don't want to lose that kind of fervor in our precincts, we do want to allow other people an opportunity to get that leadership experience, both to develop our younger election officers and also provide opportunities for upward mobility, if you will, for people who have those types of ambitions.
Sounds good. I mean, I think this is sort of an extension of our county wanting to go beyond simply what the requirement is and be a model of best practices. And I think we do that in a lot of areas. So I think this is another really good, extension of that. And I think that, let me just compliment Dina and Rick, because putting this puzzle all together with all these requirements, I mean, this was my first job in elections when I started with DC, was doing the staffing for DC. And we didn't even have a partisan requirement there. That wasn't an element. So I knew how hard it was without that. So having that on top of it and balancing all these, funneling our leadership, making the partisan balance work, having enough officers at each location, getting them into training, communicating with them, letting them know what the requirements are. It's a real challenge. So kudos to them for the great work they do, because our precincts are always very well staffed, and we do have a really outstanding corps of officers in Prince William County. So I think it's great.
So I like the concept, the goals, but there's also there's just some practical reality things. So that for years now we've struggled with the fact that we've had a serious deficit of Republican election officers. And so if you go back over the 5 years, it's not surprising to me that there was a larger number of Democrats serving as election chiefs than Republicans, just because of the pool that we had to work with. And so, we need to also continue to figure out how to recruit more election officers. A 50-50 goal is fine, but if you don't have the pool to ever get there, then it's not going to happen. So we need to. And the other concern I have is, and I understand the concept of turnover, and it seemed to me that over the years, one of the biggest challenges that the elections team has had is finding people that are willing to step up to be a chief or an assistant. There are lots of election officers that are happy to pass out stickers or work at the scanner. They don't want to be a chief or an assistant. And so again, with a limited pool of Republican officers, encouraging people that are regular officers to step up to be a chief or an assistant, is a challenge. And there's also, if the people that are serving as chiefs or assistants, we may lose people if we say, well, you've been the chief now for 5 years, you're going to be a chief somewhere else, or you're going to have to be a regular officer. We're moving somebody else to be the chief. And so I don't want the goal of parity to end up chasing away people that have worked as chiefs for a number of elections, and so I just think that the goals are great, but until we have a better balance, Democrat and Republican election officers, and we have a pool of people that are willing to step up to become a chief or assistant, it's going to take a while before we get to the 50-50 parity.
And I understand Keith's concerns, and they're valid. I would offer as a counter, though, in terms of not having the requisite number of Republican officers, we are already achieving the legal requirement that the chief and assistant chief at every precinct have to be from separate parties. So we have the right number of Republicans and Democrats, but until we made this recent shift, at 17 of those, the Republican officer was just in the wrong role in order to get that parity. So we have the right number, we just need to realign where those bodies are assigned in terms of which role they have. But again, to Keith's point, they have to be willing to do that. And so, as Eric mentioned, the policy is not intended to tie our hands or lock us in. but it is a goal that we want to work toward within the confines and the limitations of the pool that we have to work with. And so we can, it kind of goes to the difference between equal opportunity and equal outcomes, right? Our goal is to provide the equal opportunity and strive for it. But if we don't get the participation from the parties, we can't guarantee an equal outcome for them.
Yeah, I think, I've talked with Marcus about this, and, we've looked at the statistics, and we do know that statistically, there are, at least based on the voting patterns, because we don't have party registration, so we don't know for sure, but statistically, there are more Democrats than Republicans in Prince William County. And beyond that as well, our Democratic officers drop off at a lower rate than our Republican officers do. So we're kind of at a deficit. And we've done extra recruiting efforts. I mean, I think we've spent more than $20,000 over the last couple of years to reach out to people to try to get other people, and we've been successful. And now we're just working. We're working to try to figure out how we can better retain them. And any support that the parties can provide on that front to assist us with that is great. But it's hard. It's not an easy job. You have to get up at 5 a.m. You work a long day, so it's not an easy job to call people to, and I think it's why we're recognizing some of our longest serving and best serving officers today, because we know how much work it can be, and they're not doing it because we pay the officers so much money. They're doing it because they love serving democracy and serving their community. So I think that we can figure out a balance between what you guys are talking about. And on my end, I'll talk to Dina, Rick, and John, and we can kind of let you all know if we have any concerns with the language here, and then you all can back and forth till you pen a copy that meets everybody's needs.
I do share Keith's concern that in some of these cases, if a chief is told, we appreciate your long service as a chief. We want to give somebody else a turn. It's not to say that you will never be the chief again. Just not every election. There may be a few that decide that if I can't be in charge, I don't want to participate at all. Part of me says that folks who have that attitude are probably not the people that we want. However, I can understand the human sentiment behind it, which is why, as I mentioned before, we're trying very, very hard to foster this culture of service over status. Don't be so tied to having the crown, as Eric said, that if the crown goes to someone else for one election, that you take your ball and go home. That's not what we want. It should be a high team score is what we're all shooting for.
Okay, so bring this back, is that good?
Yep.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right, great, thanks. And we are so far ahead of where we were, 5 years ago. We didn't have a policy, the parties had no role at all. There was confusion. There were some election officers who, when we told them, you have to serve either as a Democratic officer or a Republican officer or in order to be chief or assistant chief, dropped off and said, well, that's, if I'm an independent and I can't be a chief or an assistant chief, then I'm just going to go home. So it's a challenge, balancing all these interests, and the team. And, we know the number of people that are initially assigned, and then there are changes the closer we get to Election Day. And I know that Dina and her team do everything they can to meet the equity goals, everything else. And I think we're light years ahead of where we were even 5 years ago, having the policy and making the steps to get closer to parity. I'd be very surprised if very many other election offices, have this kind of established policy. And frankly, given, that we can't depend on the political parties to do much of anything here, because the role of the parties, having been a party chair myself, is to not find people to work inside the precinct. I want people outside the precinct handing out sample ballots or giving people rides. So I don't want to hand my limited pool of volunteers over to the county to work inside the precinct. So, at least we've given the parties the obligation and the right to step up and approve some election officer representing their party. And I don't think there are probably very many other election officers in Virginia that do that. So,
There are not.
yeah. Okay. EB letters.
I know Marcus has drafted a letter to elect related to Veris access, so.
Yeah, so the Veris, I think probably everybody in this room knows what it is, but it is the Virginia Election Registration Information System. It's where all voter registrations are processed and stored. It's a number of things. It's where voter list maintenance is conducted. I think there is a little bit of misunderstanding on the part of the public and on my own part, for that matter, until recently, about how voter list maintenance is conducted and who is responsible for it. Those lists are maintained by the state. However, the registrars in the various localities do have a part to play in adding people, adding registrations, or removing registrations for people who are not eligible. So there's a lot of things that go on in Veris that are related to the administration of an election. I was a little bit surprised when I came onto the board to find that electoral board members do not have access to Veris. It makes total sense, again, when you consider how things are structured, where the electoral board members, we are nominated by our parties, and then we are appointed by the court. And in this role, we are to be nonpartisan, but we do come from a party. And so it makes total sense that electoral board members would not have the ability to go into Veris and start messing with things, deleting people, adding people. That should not be our purview. But it is, we have a legal requirement to oversee the Office of Elections, to oversee the registrar, who does a fantastic job, by the way. But it is our job as the board to provide that oversight. It's difficult to do when a large portion of his job is conducted inside of an environment that we have no visibility or access to. And so with that being the thought, we drafted this letter to elect, requesting read-only access for board members. The ability to change nothing, but the ability to see everything. So that is the context, the history behind where this letter came from and why we drafted it. Sure.
I didn't have any comment other than you have not observed a problem with our process. That this is just a general, more of a just an oversight thing, not something that you've observed. In your account. Okay.
And I
just
will
wanted to
make
have that
that clear.
I just want to have that on the record.
I have no reason to believe that anything is happening that shouldn't happen, or anything is or I have no reason to believe that he's not doing an excellent job. However, as I said before, every year the board is required to do a performance evaluation of the registrar. Actually, that's coming up in June. And again, hearkening back to my military days, to provide an evaluation of someone, you have to know, one, what is it you're supposed to do, and how is it you're supposed to be doing it. And the Virginia Code, the administrative code, lays it out in eye-bleeding detail, what the responsibilities of the board are, what the responsibility of the registrar is. And in order, I believe, to provide a meaningful evaluation, I have to be able to look and see whether or not all these things that we're supposed to be doing are actually getting done. And I'm sure they are, otherwise I think I would hear about it from other places. But in the interest of us trying to do our due diligence in our role as electoral board members, that is the goal here. Registrar and his staff are doing a fantastic job.
Heidi, do you have any?
I support the letter. Think we should send it.
Okay. Let me. I have some concerns about this, and I read-only, is certainly much better than, giving electoral board members complete access. But even, so with all the stuff that's going on with Doge and the access to databases of every agency in the federal government, part of the president's executive order on elections was basically to give Doge access to the voter registration systems in all the states for whatever purpose, I guess, to chase down, the huge number of non-citizens that are registered and voting, and in my view, there's a reason why Veris is restricted. I mean, not even every employee of the elections office has access to Veris, is my understanding. And there are security reasons that I think make sense. So opening up Veris to 133 electoral boards all across Virginia, 3 people on each of those boards. We had 2 electoral board members in Waynesboro last year that decided to go rogue and announce that, well, we're not going to certify the results unless we can do a hand count. And even read-only access, I think, I think you open up too much potential for either intentional or non-intentional, mischief. And I have concerns about, I don't think that I need to be able to look at the cancellation hopper every day and then get a report from Eric's team that we canceled 600 people this meeting because of that they moved or they died. I trust the registrars to and the registrar staff to do all that administrative stuff, and so I have concerns about even read-only access. So I wouldn't sign on to this, but there are 2 of you that support it. So I guess we'll see what the commissioner's response is.
I think it's, not to get in front of it, I think it's unlikely that the commissioner will agree to this. We discussed this at Viva last month, and it seemed pretty evident that there was very little appetite for this. However, I would still like to go on the record asking for it. Again, pardon my constant reference to military service, but as a pilot and as a maintenance officer in the Marine Corps, I was responsible for an entire maintenance department of Marines doing tried to bring elections into the Marine Corps, trying to do maintenance on 36 different aircraft. There were almost 500 Marines, and I was responsible for all of that. I didn't know how to fix any of these aircraft. I'm not a maintainer. I'm a pilot. I break things. I don't fix things. However, the system that was used to track the maintenance for every one of the aircraft that were assigned to our squadron, where people would go in, they would log in showing that they were in work on a particular aircraft, the work that they were doing to it, all of that. As the maintenance officer, even though I had no idea how to do anything that the avionics technicians were doing or that the flight equipment guys were doing, I still could see what they were doing in the system. I could see that they're actively working on aircraft such and such. They were doing this particular job. Why was that necessary? Because I was responsible for the work that those Marines were doing. I had to perform an evaluation on every one of them every year, saying that, yes, I know for a fact that they're doing their job. Even though I could look out on the flight line and I could see people working on aircraft, in order to say with confidence, when I did their annual evaluation, that they're doing their job and they're doing it well, I had to have that ability to see and confirm. It's my only thought. And again, I understand Keith's concern about opening up this database to 133 times 3 individuals, even on a read-only basis. However, I think when the court appoints somebody to this position, I would assume that it comes with at least some level of special trust and confidence and a belief in the character of the people that we assign to these roles. And people that can't be trusted with that kind of access, I question whether or not they should be on an electoral board. Sir.
Yeah, I mean, just for context, I know we talked a little about, to Keith's, not question, but note, access to Veris is given to staff members based on their specific need. So some staff members, whether full-time or temps, have no need to access Veris. Some staff members use it 90% of the day, and some staff members are able to access certain things and not other things. So just as an example, for election results reporting, myself and John and Natalia both have authority to do those things, to add or update election results. Other staff members do not. If you're working on the absentee team, whether you're a temp or a full-time staffer, you have access to what you need to do to help voters and assist voters and note ballots that have been returned, things like that. So that is kind of the standard that the state lays out for us. I think I understand Marcus's question, what is the level that we need as board members? I also understand Keith's concern because Keith was on a board at a time when we had a board member here in Prince William County who decided he was going to go into the Veris system, and he invented a law or a regulation that didn't exist and was removed from the board because he was using Veris in ways that he was not authorized to, and based on a process that he had invented in his own mind. So I understand, I think, both of your concerns, and I think that the registration side of things does lie more with the staff than it does with the electoral board. I mean, we looked at some of the duties, and it's less specified, and the Veris system is owned by the state. We get access to it and we use it, but it ultimately is their list. So I'm interested to see what the commissioner and the state say about sort of the reasoning for that, given their principle of access being limited to the need of the individual and how they would define that for board members. So I don't get a vote and I take no position in it. I'm only trying to provide context based on my knowledge and expertise. So
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we approve this and send it on to the state.
I would recommend amending that to table until Keith has had a chance to look at it. As he said, he wanted to
I accept
look at
that amendment to postpone for what, a meeting?
Well, I'm happy to vote no now, so, I don't need to read it more. I'm just, if you want to send it, just send it with your two signatures. I'm fine with that. With the commissioner will ultimately decide what she wants to do. But I don't think that board members should have access to this, so I wouldn't, sign on to the letter. But I'm happy if you want to sign the letter, the two of you, and submit it now.
Okay. Then
All right.
back to you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair.
All right. So we'll do that. You'll submit it with the two signatures, and we'll see what the response is. Okay. Public comment. Do we have anyone that wants to sign up for public comment? 3 minutes.
I'm just gonna get the list.
Okay. Okay. So anyone want to make any public comment? If not, okay. Would you go to the podium and state your name and give us your 3 minutes?
I'll thank John for adding, he came up with a way that we can incorporate this into the PowerPoint, so much like the county meetings, we have a timer, so Mr. Brace, you're on the clock.
And I'm gonna use this.
Yes, I figured you would, yes. Yes, my name is Kimball Brace. I'm a registered voter in the county, have been for a long time. I've been an election official, worked in a number of different precincts. I was acting registrar for a certain amount of time, and I knew that would happen. Sorry about that.
The Capitals are calling for
Colin,
reinforcements.
yes, that's right, yes. And a hockey fan, what can I tell you, yes. I guess I have two concerns in what you have discussed today. One is the question in terms of assigning poll workers to different areas or to chiefs, assistant chiefs. As I've said, I have been chief for a long time. One of the nice things that I have seen that the board does is for some of us chiefs that have been here for a long time is moving us to different precincts. With each election, I find that very useful and helping to get people that I may in a different community see and be able to recommend to Dina that indeed this person is good to have up as an assistant or as a chief on that side. I can end up seeing that because I've been chief for so long. So I would hope that kind of an experience, you continue to move people to different precincts. I know people don't want to do that in a lot of instances, but I find that to be very useful, and it's a policy that you've done for a while. So I encourage that sort of thing. The other thing that I'm concerned about is the Veris discussion. I have a company called Election Data Services. We work with state and local governments all around the country. As such, we do a lot of things with voter registration systems. We do it on behalf of the local jurisdiction. I'm doing work right now in one jurisdiction here in the state. We have access to those voters. The key here with Veris is keep in mind that these are individual voter records. That's the heart of Veris. We end up utilizing that from a GIS standpoint to make sure that people are assigned to the right precincts on that side. But we do have access to Kim Brace's record. My concern is access to board members of Veris is exposing them to the individual voter records. I don't have a problem with summary totals. I do summary totals all the time. As everybody knows, I do mapping of that sort of thing and on that side. But I'm concerned a little bit in terms of access to an individual voter record that would be there in Veris. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And hopefully I'm within 3 minutes.
Anyone else? If not, that will end the public comment. So we have a couple of items to discuss in closed session. So do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move that the Electoral Board go into closed session pursuant to Virginia Code, State Code Section 2.2-3711 Alpha 6 for the purpose of discussing issues related to proposed purchase agreements for new election equipment.
Second?
All in favor say aye. Aye.